welcome to the Living Sustainably Along the Lakeshore series. My name is Michelle Gibbs. I'm the director for the Office of Sustainability. One of our many partners who has helped put this series together over the past number of years. This started back in 2014 and has grown into a number of partnerships. And so just kind of as an FYI, we're kind of working with the city on redeveloping these programs and things like this in community education around sustainability. So just be on the lookout for more information coming soon about what this series and other series can look like going forward. But we're excited to have you here tonight. So again, you can still continue to follow us, Living Sustainably Along the Lakeshore, on Facebook. We still put out things that our partners are doing and other happenings that are going on around in the community. So if you're not already, look for us on Living Sustainably Along the Lakeshore. And so this series and a number of things in the City of Holland have followed along with the sustainability framework that was adopted by the City of Holland Sustainability Committee a number of years ago. And so these were kind of focusing in along on this triple bottom line approach, where you have the sustainability where you have environmental, social, and economics. And so this just kind of broke it down a little bit more and more cohesive for how we do as a community in terms of sustainability. And so with each month, we were focusing on a different topic of the sustainability framework. And I believe Dan is still kind of using this framework going forward. I'll have him come up in just a moment and introduce himself as well to just kind of talk a little bit more about future programming too. But again, we thank you for attending Living Sustainably Along the Lakeshore. And Dan, I will introduce you for just a moment if you don't mind.
No, that's fine. So I'm Dan Broersma. I am the new Sustainability Manager for the City of Holland. I have taken over for Mr. Ken Freestone in his Holland Energy retrofit, and Aaron Thayenwood. I've taken over his solid waste and recycling. And they combine both of those into a new program. And then we're also working on sustainability education for the city. And it's also one of my duties to help support the community in all sustainability efforts, including internal to the city, and if any of you have any information or ideas that you need help with from a sustainability perspective. So I'm a resource for our community. So that's basically it.
Thank you, Dan. And so bear with us. We have a couple of our presenters who are joining us via live stream. So I'm going to start to do the introduction for them. So right here, I'll start these slides. So tonight we are obviously focusing on trees and new ways to love our trees and how to value them in different ways. So the presentation will be given by Kathy Winnett-Murray, Dr. Greg Murray, Dr. Jim Wally, and then myself, all coming here from Hope College. And so tonight's agenda, so we have, again, joining us virtually from Arizona, we have Dr. Kathy Winnett-Murray and Dr. Greg Murray, who will be talking about why trees are important. And then we have Dr. Juma Lee, who will be talking about the basic principles of tree identification. And then myself and Michael Jipping from the Computer Science Department put together a short little presentation about the TreeSap partnership, which we'll talk about a little bit more later on in the presentation. At the end, we'll use those tickets and we'll give away a door prize, and then we'll take people outside if it's not raining to do a Q&A, show and tell, and TreeSap demo if you're interested in that too. All right, so Hannah, I might need your help for 1 second while we switch back over. Going over to that one, right? Okay.
So if the Murrays are ready, they can turn on their camera and, yep, there we go.
All right. Can you guys hear us okay? Oh, not yet.
Can you hear us okay?
Okay, I'm going to just do your bio real quick, okay? All right, I just want to make sure you guys were still there.
And just mute yourself when you're all done.
Okay. All right, so Dr. Greg Murray and Dr. Kathy Winnett-Murray are ecologists who recently retired from teaching biology at Hope College after 35 years. They have enjoyed doing research with Hope students at many locations around the world and around the U.S. That are populated by lots of different kinds of trees and lots of different kinds of people. They have loved working at on the Holland Tree Project because it is a wonderful way to help people connect with nature. And so with that, we're going to have them take over and start sharing your slides.
Okay, just a second here. It'll take me a second just to get the right presentation on here. Okay, so you should be able to see some slides here now, right? Can you guys see those?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, greetings everyone. It's from Arizona, where we really do have trees. I want to confirm that. And it's great to connect with people back in Holland and talk about a lot of trees there. Usually when we're thinking of trees and the environment, we're thinking of benefits from places like expensive forests, which are really common in West Michigan. But what we want to talk to you about tonight is focusing on the trees that we're living right next to, right in the neighborhood in the city of Holland and around the campus, and the benefits that they provide to people. Ecologists talk about benefits that things in the environment give to people as ecosystem services. And in the urban environment where we're living in Holland, some of the ecosystem services that trees are providing are things on this list. They mitigate droughts and flooding. They promote climate stability. The trees purify our air and water. Trees are incredibly important to us for other reasons too, things that have to do with beauty and our mental well-being. They provide habitat and food for lots of animals that live in the community. They reduce noise pollution, and they reduce the heat island effect. So when we started this project in 2018, we were really interested in communicating what those benefits are for the trees that are right here in the neighborhood of the city of Holland and on Hope College property. And we also wanted to help the community to decide on what decisions we can make now that will help us manage that resource in the future. But most of all, we really love the trees because they encourage us to have a relationship with nature. So here's just an example of what we were doing. We would go around the community and measure the diameter and breast height, which is a standard forestry measure, of each and every tree that was on city property or campus property. And this came to be one of our favorites. This was the American elm that used to be outside of Dimnett Chapel, which unfortunately had to be taken down in 2019 because of insect infestation was causing it to drop branches on nearby cars. So it had to be removed before it caused a big problem. But before it got taken down, we estimated a lot of the benefits based on the size of that tree. And I want to mention too that we know that tree, based on its size, was probably about 180 years old. So that tree was quite a survivor in this city. Based on estimates provided by a software program called iTree, which is used across the nation, we know that this tree was avoiding water running into the storm drain system on the order of 92 cubic feet per year. All trees are doing that. So this is just one sample. The amount of carbon sequestered by that tree is almost 82 pounds per year. The amount of total carbon that was stored in that tree when it had to be taken down, we estimate to be over 6 tons. This is the amount of carbon that is released by about 4.9 average cars in the United States per year. Or you can think of it as the average amount of carbon that would be required to be released by heating 2.7 single-family homes every year. Just this one tree. In addition, we estimate that tree was saving an amount of energy equivalent to almost 1,000 kilowatts of hours of energy use per year by shading nearby buildings and by cutting down on the wind that was blowing against those same buildings. So that's just one tree. And last but not least, this tree was removing about 43 ounces of particulate pollution a year. We're going to talk about how it does that a little more specifically in a minute.
And maybe not just particulate,
pollution. But you're probably familiar already with all of these other benefits of trees for ecosystem services, but you may be less familiar with how they remove air pollution. So we wanted to spend a little bit of time on that in particular because it's a little bit less obvious. This is a cross-section through a leaf, and this is a diagram of the same thing. And suffice it to say that, first, trees absorb gases from the atmosphere. And of course, some of them are important pollutants. Obviously, they have to exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide with the atmosphere already. But even though CO2 is necessary for plant growth, I mean, that's ultimately it's the source of all the carbon and the molecules that we use as nutrients as animals and so forth. But even though it's necessary for plant growth, we could also include carbon dioxide here as a pollutant because of our reliance on fossil fuels. We put a lot of it into the atmosphere, and of course it's the primary greenhouse gas that we put into the atmosphere too. So sometimes it's considered a pollutant. But there are lots of other gases that are more directly toxic to animals and are also absorbed by trees, again, through these little pores in the bottom of the leaf called stomata, and they get incorporated into the cells of the plant, and ultimately they get shed by the leaves in the fall and end up in the soil. But we're talking about things like oxides of nitrogen and oxides of sulfur, carbon monoxide, and a bunch of other gaseous pollutants. But still other pollutants are solids rather than gases. In other words, they're particles. But trees can remove those from the air too, but they do so in a really different way. The particular ones that we're talking about are called fine particulates, or sometimes they're referred to in the literature as PM2.5. These are the particles that are less than 2.5 millionths of a meter. In other words, about less than 1/100th the diameter of a human hair. So these are really, really small things. And in fact, they're so small that they can be absorbed directly into the bloodstream in your lungs. They get emitted by all sorts of things, like, for example, burning fossil fuels or even the smoke from wildfires, or sometimes they're even formed around molecules of gaseous pollutants that are emitted by burning fossil fuels too. Anyway, those are a particular health concern for people. We're learning, it's still a matter of a lot of research, in terms of the medical effects of them, but epidemiologists can already estimate some of the mortality effects of fine particulates on human health from the data that are collected in places where people are subjected to a lot of them in the air that they breathe. A little bit about these fine particulates and their health effects, because there are some really interesting local examples. How bad are they for human health? Well, this graphic shows the estimated annual mortality attributable to fine particulate pollution in a publication from 2010. You can see that it's a lot higher in the Midwest and parts of the East, and that's primarily because the electricity in those regions was mostly generated by burning coal. By the way, the monetary costs associated with those health effects were estimated in 2010 to be $100 billion per year. So this is a really serious issue. And a lot of them come from the coal-fired power plants that we are or were using. Just to bring this a little bit closer to home, from that same publication, these are the top 10 plants, these are electricity power plants in the United States, ranked by their health impacts. And again, this is based on 2010 data, or up to 2010. And you can see that several of these are here in the Midwest, and that number 7 is the J.H. Campbell plant that belongs to Consumers Energy right up in Port Sheldon, about 5 miles north of where you're sitting right now. These are really significant numbers of annual deaths to human beings, hospital admissions, and heart attacks that are attributable to the fine particulate pollution. And so you can see these are really significant, whether we're talking about effects on families or economic productivity or whatever. Interestingly, the negative effects of the plant in Port Sheldon were reduced between 2010 and 2018. Those are the most recent data that I have looked at. So from 142 deaths down to 79, 228 heart attacks down to 49, 105 down to 23 hospital admissions, and I can't remember what the number was before, but down to about 504 asthma attacks that are attributable to the effects of those fine particulates less than 2.5 microns. And just, you know, you might wonder what the reduction was due to. Well, the reduction is happening in other places too, but it's primarily because of the requirements to put scrubbers on the smokestacks so that they reduce the amount of fine particulates and other gaseous pollutants that go into the atmosphere. So these are really significant things to people for a lot of reasons. But how is it that trees are able to remove those fine particulates when they can't be absorbed into the leaves by, through the stomata like gases are? Well, this is a really interesting thing too, and I want to spend a couple of minutes on it because it's not at all obvious. The way that trees remove particulate pollutants, these are solids, is really cool. And you can think of it like this: as air moves across any kind of a surface, like a leaf, for example, the closer you get to the surface of the leaf, the more there is friction between that layer of air and the stationary surface, like the surface of a leaf. And as a result, the velocity of the air relative to that stationary surface decreases the closer you get to that surface, until right at the surface it has to be zero. The air can't be moving there at all. And so that layer of slow-moving air is called a boundary layer, and it depends on a whole bunch of things, including the velocity of the air far away from the surface. But the point is that anything that's suspended in the air, any solid particles, dust, PM 2.5, and so forth, they get to going slower and slower relative to the surface of the leaf until the velocity of the air movement can't hold them up into the air anymore, and they settle onto the surface. And so that happens to all particulates that are suspended in the air that get into that boundary layer that's really close to the leaf. Well, so when the air is moving slow enough, the particles get deposited on the surface, and they stay there until the leaf falls off or until water washes it off into the soil. Ultimately, they all end up in the soil. I want to make an analogy here that you're actually already familiar with, and this is something that has fascinated me since I was a little boy. I always had a fan in my room in the summertime. I grew up in Southern California, and I was fascinated by the fact that the fan blades collected a lot of dust particles, way more than there was on the horizontal surface that the fan was sitting on. And the reason is because of this boundary layer. The fan is pulling in a lot of air, pulling a lot of air through that cylinder that is defined by the fan blades. But all of the dust that's in the air ends up, or at least a lot of it, ends up getting trapped in that boundary layer, and that's why the fan blades got dusty. Well, the same thing is going on here. And so these intercepted particulates then wash off with rainwater, or they fall off in the fall, and that's how trees can remove even those particulates that cause human health problems.
The particles are still there, but they don't get breathed into your lungs.
Right.
This is wonderful.
And a lot of these they're not highly toxic, except for the fact that they're really small and end up in your bloodstream. After all, it's just smoke in many cases.
So, that was one, a little more in-depth example of all those benefits, but going back to that individual American elm, I gave you some examples a few minutes ago of all of the things that tree is doing. We have now censused almost 14,000 trees in Holland, and we have counted up the dollar value of those benefits for all of the trees. So not just one elm anymore, but 13,784 trees. You can see that those benefits are huge. We're not talking about not just some ounces of particulate air pollution being taken out of the air so that you don't breathe it, but 4 tons. And that's every single year, year after year after year. We're talking almost 128 tons of carbon being removed out of the atmosphere every year, which is helping to slow down the rate of climate change. A huge amount of avoided runoff, megakilowatt hours of energy savings, and a whopping $190,000 worth of total benefits if we translate that into what those services are worth. That's just counting the things that are easily translatable into dollar benefits, not things like mental health benefits and so forth, which are extremely valuable. And that's every single year. As the trees grow, it's like investing in benefits because those very same trees, as they get bigger, are doing more of these things all the time. So trees are one of the best investments that communities can make.
This might come up later too, but these almost 14,000 trees are not all of the trees in the city. Actually, only a small fraction of the trees in the city. These are just the ones that are on the Hope College campus and on city property, sort of along the rights of way and in most of the parks and stuff like that. It does not include the trees that are on people's private property within the city of Holland.
So every year with increasing benefits, our trees are providing lots of services for us. But as you probably know, change is in the air. And we have already documented, a community of biologists around the world have documented how plants like trees are responding to that climate change. And we know that different species are going to be favored in different environments in the near future, and that the distributions of some species are already shifting. And so one of the points we want to make with the whole community is that we need to plan for the future, to retain this resource, to be able to expand it, and to ensure that we keep getting these benefits from our urban trees long into the future. One thing we know is that Holland has great potential to maximize these benefits. This is information from a study that was done several years ago that documented approximate percentage of our land cover that is currently in trees. You can see that in 2013, that was about 24%. But according to this study, we could accommodate another 15% of our land cover and possible tree canopy. That means that we can take care of the trees that we have now, but our town also has great potential to expand our tree canopy, meaning that we can get even greater benefits from trees in the future.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now because I think Genoa is up next to talk about identifying trees.
Thank you, Greg. Yeah, that was really fantastic. We really appreciate that. And I'm going to mute again, and then we'll pull you back up for the Q&A section, okay?
Sure, that'll be fine.
All right, Jinhua, if you'd like to start making your way up this way. So Dr. Jinhua Lee got his PhD from the University of New Hampshire and did his postdoctoral work at Harvard University. He worked at Harvard University as a research scientist for 10 years before joining the Hope College biology faculty in 2009. He has taught general biology, several plant-related courses, and evolutionary biology at Hope College since joining the team. So, welcome.
Thank you. All right. So on. Okay, so my colleagues Whit Murray and Greg Murray, they did a fantastic job, right? And so I learned a lot about importance of trees. So with that, don't you love trees, right? Don't you want to hug them?
Yeah.
Yeah, but wait, don't try to hug all of them. You gotta know what they are before you do that. And that's the identification comes in. right? I had experience of hugging poison sumac when I was little. That did not go well. And so for tree identification, there are, of course, a lot of things that you need to take into consideration. And I just listed a few of them. And I'm going to use hazelnuts as examples. And also the plane trees at the bottom on that slide. So first thing, of course, identifying tree is not rocket science, but sometimes I think it's actually probably more difficult than rocket science. So unique characteristics we need to use, right? You need to find unique features. And the example up there, there are 2 species of hazelnuts in this part of Michigan or eastern United States. And what you see here is on the top, that's American hazelnut. The 2 pictures there. And of course, at the bottom, that's the beaked hazelnut. Have you ever seen hazelnuts grown in this part of the world? They're beautiful. And the fruits are really, really nice. We actually tasted that last week. It was good. So the unique features, you see here on the top, American hazelnut. On the right picture, you see little hairs, right, with heads on top of them. And then on the left there, and that's the fruit enclosed in that green structure. But at the bottom there, you see the big nuts, hazelnuts. What you see here, the fruits looking very different, right? They're unique from each other. So on the right there, in the big hazelnuts, you don't see the glandular hairs. So looking into this unique features, that's how we identify trees. That's obvious, right? And also we need to think about, well, there is actually a wide variation in some species. You've got to take into consideration that. Don't just say, okay, the species has this, hair this long, that's it. No, there is a wide range of variation sometimes. So you got to take that into consideration as well. And also, of course, remember all the traits that we see in trees and other plants, they are the result of combined genetics and also environmental impact. So, so that's why you see hazelnuts, they all look similar, right? Because they share a lot of genes. But they also turn out to be different a little bit different when they live in different environments, right? And interestingly, if you look at the overall distribution of beaked hazelnuts versus common American hazelnut, and the beaked ones tend to be actually further in the north. If you try to look for the beaked ones, go to UP area. There is lots of them. And the American ones, they are mostly to the south a little bit. But in the north, you see 1 or 2, a few of them only. Another one is, of course, we need to think about that when you try to identify trees, you need to know, well, some of the features are not going to be there, right, in the spring or in the fall. So that means that you need to, sometimes we do need to keep in mind, and some of the features that we commonly use to identify certain trees, they might not be there. And therefore, you need to actually observe the trees over several seasons in order to make sure that your identification is correct. Okay? And another one, really the really fun part of identifying trees is actually think about what kind of structures trees have and their functions that they do, for the trees. And I give you one example at the bottom here. You see at the bottom here on the left, the little picture there, that shows the plane tree or sycamore tree, right? We have a lot of them on campus or in Holland, and they have leaves that drop, and their leaves look like, multiple lobes. And they're deciduous, so they drop their leaves, right, even now. But on the right there's another species, and that one actually is evergreen. And you see the leaves being very different, right? And it turns out that one actually occurs only in Vietnam. Okay, so clearly, you think about the deciduousness in this case here, in this species here in North America versus the one in Vietnam, which is evergreen. Now you need to think about what kind of function, right, does that specific character or feature have. So think about their habitats. So, now I use only a few examples to just, basically to show some of the fundamental principles when we do tree identifications. So, thank you very much. Oh, okay, there is another thing I want to mention. So of course, we still need to try to look into the details of the morphology of trees. In this case, it shows a Japanese Zelkova. We look at the leaves and things like that. But now, we also have new tools that can help us identifying trees. And that is actually on the left side there, right? At the bottom, that's a gene, right? And at the top there, we actually get DNA sequences from a tree that you want to know what species that is. You actually get the DNA out of it, and then you search the database of a lot of data of a lot of trees, and to use that to pinpoint what species that might be. So this is called DNA barcoding. So we've been doing that even at Hope College as well. So as the technologies develop, we have more tools to actually help us identify trees. Sorry.
All right, thank you very much. So with that, I'm going to start talking a little bit about our TreeSap partnership. So over the past few summers, we had a few students, Caitlin DeWitt, Zoe Gum, and Alec Borodin, who were from our biology department, and they began working with myself, Dr. Kathy Winnett Murray, and Dr. Greg Murray. And we began a census project with the City of Holland to help inventory all of the trees, as we were mentioning earlier, in the City of Holland and on Hope College's property. And so this was every tree in the public right-of-way in most of our public parks, with the exception of some of the really large ones, like Van Ralsey Park, where you can't quite grasp all of that. And the heavily forested areas also like DeGraff Nature Center as well. But the goal was to determine not only the environmental value of each of these trees, but also its monetary value through the energy savings. And so Greg and Kathy kind of referenced that a little bit earlier in some of their graphs and slides earlier, so I'm not going to go too far into that. But so then, as we were having these conversations, we started having extra conversations with Mike Jipping from the Hope College Department of Computer Science. And he loves working with summer research students, and he had a couple of students who were interested in getting involved in this. And so they helped us to actually develop an app that we could use as a tool for communicating a lot of these benefits out into the community and make it a little bit more interesting and engaging. And our long-term goal would also be to invite citizen science to help us inventory and get to know more of our neighborly trees. And so, as I mentioned, this was a project that took a lot of people to help come behind this. So we had the Murrays and Dr. Lee from the biology department, as well as 3 Hope College biology students, Mike Jipping, and a number of computer science students over the years who put in time and effort to develop these products. Bob Hunt from our physical plant, Alex from the Holland GIS department. He was really instrumental because he helped us get that technology for the students to take the iPad to the base of each tree, one by one and help us to coalesce all of that data all into one place. Andy Kenyon from the Parks Department has really been on board with this. The City of Holland Sustainability Committee, Holland and Bloom has been a major financial supporter of this project as well, along with the Hope College Green Team and Office of Sustainability, as well as Bartlett Tree Services has been there to help us kind of do some inventorying as well. And one of the tools that we used while we were doing this was a software that was developed by the USDA And so this was called iTree. And so this was a tool that we used to help us calculate the carbon sequestration, the pollution interception, runoff reduction, energy savings. And so what our students did was they put in the genus, species, and DBH of all of these trees, and we also had to put in the region of where these trees are, because they can have differing values from that standpoint. But so for all of the different species that were in the city of Holland, they plugged these numbers all in, and then it gave us those monetary values and environmental benefits too, which is really, really helpful, because then that allows you to communicate the value of these trees more cohesively. I'm just covering up my arrows. And so what our students did was, like I said, they walked around to each tree, so you could see the students walking along the street lines, one by one, taking their tape measure, measuring around, getting the approximate size of a tree, and then you can see all of these little data points right there. So that's them walking along every single area of the city, which was really cool. And again, this was just city property trees, so in the right-of-ways, not in private property. And so with this one, it's really interesting because then you can start to see more and more of these trees. So this number says it's just under 2,000, but this is just the city of Holland trees that were inventoried. And then we have another map that shows our nearly 2,000 campus trees that were inventoried as well. And so it's really interesting because like in the city parks and on our Hope campus, we had a lot of kind of mixed species. So that was where we were having a little bit of trouble. We had to bring in a lot of expertise from Dr. Lee or the Murrays to help the students make that official designation or call of what the tree was. But because of a lot of these trees coming more like ornamentals because of their aesthetic values and things like that, there's a little bit harder time trying to figure out what the trees may be, because you may have some cross species from that standpoint. But overall, in the city of Holland, they found roughly 171 species. So we really love showing this one because it's just a really beautiful graph. And so it just kind of shows the huge variety that we have of trees in the city of Holland. And then the same thing goes for the Hope College campus. We had 95,000 trees that were identified through that inventory. Again, a nice rainbow of trees. And so this really shows that species diversification that we have on our campus as well as in the city property. And then just another graph to kind of show some of their data is that there was a wide range of tree size distribution around the city as well. So you could go all the way from these tiny little trees that were just recently planted to some of our historic trees that have been around for a very, very long time. And so then this is what you would see when you develop or when you download the TreeSap app on the Apple system. They are currently working and finalizing the Android version. Mike has had a little bit of trouble with Google trying to get it to populate from that standpoint, so he's trying to work with them on this. But he recently just did a new update earlier this week for the Apple version. But so when you go up to the base of the tree, so you would basically walk up, you'd want to be at the very bottom of the tree as much as possible, and it's that GIS coordination or coordinates that were entered into the tree or into the database when they were first doing the inventory. And so based on that, it will tell you what kind of tree that is, and it will tell you the common name, the genus, species, the approximate DBH, latitude and longitude, and that's kind of that marker, as well as the tree ID, so as it follows along within our tree inventory as well. And then you can swipe over, and then it will tell you the annual tree benefits of that one specific tree. So this one tree has $41.59 worth of value to our tree, or to our community. And then they also just made it into this really cute little nutrition label version to kind of show the value too. Some of the future work within this app and in the project, obviously now that the Murrays have retired, Dr. Lee and a couple of other biology faculty members who have come on board and are joining our landscape committee team on Hope's campus, we're hoping to really kind of push this forward a little bit more. Broaden our inventory to include schools. We really think that this would be a fun way to engage our younger citizen scientists. And also maybe do the Hope College Nature Preserve, which is just outside of the city limits on the north or on the south side of town. incorporate private property into the inventory. Right now, people can mark their own trees, but we're working on a way of curating that information as a team. So then that way, if someone says this is what I think it is, then there will be a few people on Hope's campus who will kind of go through and be like, okay, yeah, that gets the thumbs up. It's not a palm tree in the middle of Holland, you know? And then we're also hoping that we'll be able to continue to track tree growth. So eventually we'd like to get back around and do all of the trees again. There's a lot of change even in the trees that are here in Holland now because of some of the street construction projects and things along those lines. So it's going to be an ongoing project to continue to keep this database up and going. Some goals will be to create a comprehensive species vulnerability assessment. So Holland and Bloom and our Parks Department, we're really interested in this because it can help us identify that if we're starting to see an uptick in some kind of an invasive species that's hurting our trees, they'll be able to open it up on their app and be able to see how many, because you can do a filter on it, and I'll demonstrate this when we go outside. You can do a filter on the app to say, show me all of the American elm trees in the city. And so then it blows away all of the other ones and just kind of shows you those individual ones, which is really cool from that standpoint. Enable people to appreciate the value of their trees. So again, maybe giving them a hug as long as you know it's not a poison sumac tree, you know? You can still appreciate it from afar if you want. And then also improve the city's impact, environmental impact and beauty. So we'd really also like to be able to have this do more with the urban canopy and things like that as well, to help us give a better picture from that. And with that, we're going to open it up for questions. So I'm going to bring Greg and Kathy back on, and I'm going to have Dr. Lee come back up. I know we have a small group, but feel free to ask your questions once we get settled in here. Okay, Greg and Kathy, are you still there?
Yes, we are.
Okay, perfect. If you want to turn your camera back on, we're going to start our Q&A section.
Cool.
All right. Does anyone want to throw out the first question? All right, so I had a question when you guys were presenting, and so you were talking about the leaves, and so I was just curious if you think, or what would be the most beneficial from a particulate standpoint collection? Would more of like the deciduous trees where they have like the broader leaves, or would it be more like the pines because they have kind of the pine needles that can kind of go all over the place? Is there a difference? Have you seen anything like that?
There's a fair bit of data on that, and even though there's a lot of variation among even conifers versus, or even within the conifers and within the broadleaf trees, I think the conifers have higher...
Conifers take out more particulates, and it's because they actually altogether, the needles comprise a very, very large surface area. So it's not just that the deciduous have a broad leaf, but conifers have a lot of leaf surface packed into those needle bundles. And they're also a little sticky from the resins that conifers produce, and that helps the particulates, probably reduces the boundary layer over which the particulates will actually stick to the leaf.
And fuzzy-leaved trees, like there are some trees that have hairs on the under surfaces of the leaves. Those tend to have a little bit thicker boundary layer too, but also remember, conifers usually keep their needles all year.
Yeah.
Whereas the broadleaf trees lose them, most of them do in your area.
Okay, thank you. Other questions?
So does conifers continue to sequester carbon even in the wintertime?
So I don't know if you could hear the question, but the question was, do conifers continue to sequester carbon even in the wintertime?
Yeah, they do, but at a lower rate. So the rate at which they can photosynthesize is dependent on temperature, and part of the reason for that is just the mobility of water. But you know, when the soil is really cold and the roots are really cold, you know, the leaves are you know, the needles on the plant are not really transpiring very much, and so they're not able to photosynthesize very rapidly, and so the rate is much lower, but it's non-zero.
So here at the library, we've had an Arbor Day program for probably 30 years. We've given out thousands of tree seedlings. And we always choose a certain number of types. And the patrons don't like conifers. They always choose the red buds and the flowering something. So it's really hard to get them to, you know, even to get the natural trees from Michigan, they don't really like those. They want something that's a cultivar or whatever that's showy. So it sounds like it would be better if they went with some of the ones that are more natural or more conifer, but it's hard for us to get them to do that.
Yeah, and there's we're big fans of native trees for a variety of reasons, but you know, one of the things that you would see from looking at all of the data that we collected in the city of Holland, there's over 90 species of trees that are just on Hope College or city property. And of course, the great majority of them are exotic. They're not native to the Holland area at all. So people, I mean, it's not just people in Holland who are getting their trees from the library for the Arbor Day program. It's just people like exotics. They like unusual things and mutant varieties of even the common trees in their region. So that's kind of a universal thing. I don't really understand it.
And having a diversity of tree species is not a bad thing if you're planning for the future, because disease outbreaks and pathogens and pests will continue to happen. Like right now, the hemlock woolly adelgid is in West Michigan starting to kill some hemlock trees. So, you know, if you're planning over the long-term future, you want to have a good, healthy variety planted so that not all your trees are going to disappear because of one outbreak. There is also information available from the USDA about what kind of trees you can plant for the future, given what we know about climate change and pests coming on the next horizon. And one of the species our students looked up that is a good pick for our area is river birch. And I don't think that's on many people's radar screen yet. And some people are gonna think there's downsides to river birch because it sheds. But that is a good tree to plant for the future that is a native in our area.
I was just thinking about this with the pests and so forth. Imagine if Holland had planted all of its rights of way, you know, the boulevards along the streets and stuff like that, with ash trees. There are some blocks that had ash trees, but boy, when emerald ash borers went through, they killed all of those trees. So diversity is good.
So indeed, there are lots of trees planted are exotic trees, and that's why we kind of need horticultural folks to try to develop cultivars, and good ones, meaning that as good ornamentals people love, and so that's a way to kind of encourage people to actually plant local trees. So there are places that have been doing that, but it's kind of slow.
Seems like there are more and more invasive species plants coming into our area, especially the viney ones that grow up trees. Are those harmful to the trees or not?
Did you hear that question at all? There was a question about there's more and more invasive plant species that are coming in, and you can see them, the viney ones that are starting to, that can circulate around the trees, and how harmful are those to those?
Well, I don't know exactly which ones the questioner might be talking about. It kind of depends on the specifics, but Jim Wong might know more about that. I mean, you know, there are lots of native plants that do that too. I mean, grapevines, for example, are native, and Virginia creeper and for that matter, poison ivy, you know, has a vine form, and they compete with the trees that they grow on, but on a community wide basis, they're all tolerated. I'm not sure which. There's a clematis that some people plant that might compete with the trees in people's yards, but I'm not sure.
So one of them might, sorry. So one of the vines that's very common here in this area is probably the bittersweet. It might be actually a hybrid between the native species and introduced.
We're not getting any audio anymore.
I muted you for just a second, so there was a feedback.
Okay.
So that actually happens in many other areas. For example, there are some hybrid honeysuckles, and they've been growing crazy all over the place. And it turns out hybrids do have much greater growth, and they take over because it looks like they can actually live pretty well in the environment where both parents can survive well. So, and there are people who've been actually trying to do some molecular study to identify the hybrids, because sometimes you can see the hybrids, right? Obviously, because they have intermediate, morphology between the parents. But other times they look, as one parent or the other parent. So you got to actually use some other tools to see whether they are hybrids. And that's, at least right now, there is this hypothesis that hybrids between the native species and exotic introduced species, they are actually spreading much faster, especially in disturbed areas. So that's one of the projects I'm planning on doing with my former colleague at Harvard. That is to actually look at the yew trees, right, in the city. And he said maybe, all the ones that grow in wild places, actually they are hybrids between the European species and the Asian species. So it's an interesting question, but that's also a very active research area.
Any other questions? Yeah.
I had a question. It was just like, if if there are all these benefits that the trees give us throughout Holland, and we can calculate like the monetary value, if we looked at a list of the things that the city of Holland could do for sustainability initiatives, which ones are most cost effective, how high up would planting more trees be? Would it be at the very top for most cost effective sustainability initiatives, or would it be top 5, or I don't know.
Okay, so we had a little bit of a complicated question. I'm going to try to rephrase that a bit again. And so it was around the top benefit or the top sustainability initiatives that we could do as a community. And so how high would planting trees or planting trees and evaluating those be in terms of sustainability projects to try and do in a community, especially Holland?
Well, from my perspective, it's really helpful. I mean, trees provide lots and lots of benefits, but honestly, the best thing that Holland could do is something that a lot of people have been working on for quite some time, and that's to cut greenhouse gas emissions. So,
less work for the trees to do after the fact.
Yeah, because honestly, I mean, lots of work has been done on this. I mean, and you can plant trees all over the world on all of the places that can grow trees, and it's not enough to keep up with our addition of carbon dioxide and methane and all the other greenhouse gases the atmosphere in terms of the effect on climate. So the best thing you can do is essentially to do what the community energy plan and the ways in which people are talking about modifying it now are trying to bring about, and that's to increase our reliance on carbon neutral means for generating electricity, and to electrify everything that we can, from our vehicles to our heating and cooling systems in our homes and stuff like that. All the stuff that we use that uses fossil fuels, reducing that as much as possible would be the best thing for sustainability in every way.
These might come quickly thereafter, importance, but that's on the top.
Yeah, but it's an all of the above.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Yep.
I had a question for Dr. Lee.
Yep.
It was just like, when you were talking about the hybrids, how we see like a lot of hybrids, with their current trees around the region, like how hard does that make identification, like for an ordinary person? Like when you go out and you try and identify based on like the unique characteristics that you were talking about, like how often are you gonna run into hybrid where that would be a problem?
Yeah, again, it takes really some effort, right, to try to identify hybrids. And first you got to know the two parents well, right? And then identifying the unique characters of the two parents. Then, the very recent hybrids, they tend to show the intermediate features or a combination of both parents. And that's how you can identify the hybrids. But a lot of times it is not easy. And so that's why we also try to use molecular data, because we want to look at the genes and see actually you do have genes from both parents, right, coming into that hybrid offspring. Good question.
All right, well, we just had a question for Dr. Lee, so I think, did anybody else have any last questions that they wanted to ask the group? All right. Greg and Kathy, do you have any final comments or anything that you'd like to share with the group today?
I would just thank you and the library for putting on these programs, because it's something that there's a huge need for, and I know there's a dedicated group of people in Holland, but they need to have a reason to get together and to network with each other, and there especially needs to be a way of drawing in more young people that are going to run Holland and the world in the future. So there's a great need for this, and I'm really happy that people are stepping up and doing it.
Thank you for inviting us to participate.
Well, we appreciate you guys doing this from a distance and still participating with us. So, it's been such a pleasure to work with you guys over the years, and happy retirement.
Thanks. We're still happy to be involved, but yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you. Well, we're going to switch over to our door prize, and then maybe allow people to go outside to the park if it's not raining. It's been raining all day here, so hopefully you'll get that down there.
Oh, you need to come to Arizona.
There you go. All right, well, thank you both so much, and Dr. Lee, thank you.
Thank you.
And again, thank you to all of our partners. But if you can pull out your tickets, we'll do that now. And I'm going to sign you guys off. All right, thank
Okay.
you. All right, so if you guys could pull up your tickets. Hannah, if you would want to pull out 2 of those tickets. So one of our partners, League of Women Voters Holland area, they graciously purchased a couple of books of our Trees of Michigan Field Guide, and this is kind of one of the go-to resources for identifying trees in the Holland area or in Michigan. So.
Wow.
All right, this is team
effort.
effort. Here we go.
Team effort.
How many people does it take to do a ticket? All right, so 814288. All right.
Whoa.
So we'll grab a book for you on the way out, and we have one more.
One more. Wow. My honor.
All right. And then we have 814290. All right, there we go. And again, thank you to League of Women Voters for purchasing those books. And we did offer it as if anyone had any unique plants that they wanted to bring in, we can try and stump Dr. Lee and see what kind of plants we might have had in the area. Otherwise, if anyone is interested, we can go out to Centennial Park and try and play with TreeSap, or you can, I would just encourage you also to download it and just play with it on your own too. So, yeah. And again, if you have the Android, it should hopefully be up soon. It was supposed to be up this summer, but they've gotten a couple of like kickbacks in terms of the software for some reason, so they're trying to work through what that might be. But hopefully that will be up there shortly. All right, well, thank you.